You're desperate, and that right there is exactly why you feel so empty. Take a moment and really think about it. Every frantic text you've sent, desperately chasing a reply. Every obsessive refresh of an inbox, waiting for an email that never comes. Every single time you've wanted something so badly it sat in your chest like a heavy stone, only to end up with nothing. Here's the hard truth: desperation doesn't attract what you want, it actively pushes it away. This isn't one of those motivation speeches you've heard 1,000 times. It's not about grinding yourself into dust or just believing in yourself a little harder. The Stoics figured something out that most people today still miss completely. The actual architecture of your mind is what determines the direction of your life. Not just your effort. Not just your talent. The way you think. Consider Marcus Aurelius. He ran the most powerful empire the world had ever seen while dealing with illness, betrayal, and profound grief. He didn't win because he wanted it more than anyone else. He won because his thinking operated on a different level entirely. This video lays out 6 rules. Not hacks, not shortcuts. Real rules that fundamentally rewire how you see the world, how you experience desire, and how you move through your life. Strip away the delusion. Learn to internalize your goal. Use every obstacle. Anticipate the fall. Embrace the end. And build a fortress inside yourself that nothing can touch. You've been acting like a beggar your whole life. It's time to start thinking like an emperor. And hey, before we dive into the first rule, if you're tired of the chase and you're ready to shift your mindset, drop the word emperor in the comments. Let's see who's actually serious about this. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button for the fear sermon, because we're just getting started with this kind of thinking. Rule number 1 is to strip the glamour. Here's the first uncomfortable truth you need to sit with: you don't actually know what you want. You think you do, but pause for a second. What you're really running after isn't the thing itself. It's the idea of the thing. It's the story you've carefully built around it. It's the version of yourself you imagine you'll magically become the moment you finally have it. You're not chasing the goal. You're chasing a feeling you've projected onto that goal. The Stoics had a name for this distortion. They called it false glamour, the way our imagination paints an object of desire in a light it simply doesn't possess in reality. You look at a relationship and you picture romance, security, finally being chosen. You look at money and you picture freedom, respect, the feeling of having arrived. You look at status and you picture peace. But here's what the Stoic practice of stripping the glamour forces you to do: it makes you look at the thing itself, raw and completely unadorned. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this directly. He talked about looking at roasted meat not as a delicacy, but as the corpse of an animal. Wine. Fermented grape juice. A beautiful person. Skin, muscle, and bone. He wasn't trying to be morbid. He was practicing seeing clearly. When you finally stop seeing everything through the film of your own projections, something remarkable happens. The desperation starts to fade. That frantic energy inside you quiets down. And in that quiet space, you can finally ask yourself the right question. Do I actually want this thing, or have I just convinced myself that getting it will somehow fix something broken inside me? Most people never ask that question. They just keep running. The Stoic approach doesn't tell you to stop wanting things. It tells you to want them honestly. To understand what they really are, what they will genuinely give you, and what they absolutely cannot. A desire built on illusion is fragile. It shatters the moment reality shows up. But a desire built on clarity, on a real understanding of what you're pursuing and why, that desire has traction. It doesn't spiral out of control. It doesn't consume you. It simply guides you. Strip the glamour. See the thing exactly as it is. Then decide if you still want it. If you do, you're finally ready to pursue it in a way that might actually work. Rule number 2 is to internalize your goals. Epictetus was born a slave. He owned nothing, not his time, not his body, not even his own freedom. And yet, he became one of the most philosophically liberated human beings to ever live. How? He understood one thing with absolute, crystal clear precision. There are things within your control, and there are things that are not. And the moment you stop fighting that line, the moment you accept it completely, everything changes. Most people set goals completely backward. They say, I want to get the promotion. I want her to love me back. I want this business to succeed. Every single one of those goals is an outcome. And outcomes are never fully in your control. Other people's decisions are involved. Luck is involved. Timing is involved. When you anchor your entire sense of progress and self-worth to something you cannot fully control, you've handed your peace of mind over to the world. And the world? It's chaotic and completely indifferent to your plans. Internalizing your goals means rewriting them. Not, I want to get the promotion, but, I want to prepare with excellence, communicate my value clearly, and perform at the highest level I'm capable of. Not, I want her to love me back, but, I want to show up as the best version of myself, honestly and without desperation. You control the inputs. You release the outputs. This isn't passivity. This is precision. When your goal is internal, anchored to your effort, your character, and your process, you become almost immune to failure anxiety. Because failure, in the traditional sense, no longer really applies. You either executed your process or you didn't. The external result is just information, not a verdict. It tells you what to adjust, not who you are. This shift is quietly revolutionary. The person who internalizes their goals doesn't need the outcome to feel successful. They just keep executing. And paradoxically, almost unfailingly, they get better results. Because they're not leaking energy into worry. They're not paralyzed by what might go wrong. They're just doing the work. Epictetus couldn't free his body, but he freed his mind completely. That same freedom is available to you, right here, right now. Rule number 3 is to transform every obstacle. Something is going to go wrong today. Something went wrong last week. Something will blindside you next month in a way you cannot predict right now. That's not pessimism. That's just life. The question isn't whether obstacles will come. They will. The question is what they mean when they arrive. And that meaning is entirely yours to assign. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action actually advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This isn't a motivational poster. It's a description of how he actually governed through plague, through war, through the betrayal of people he trusted with his life. Every disruption became material. Every setback became instruction. The Stoics called the complete embrace of this idea Amor Fati, a Latin phrase meaning love of fate. Not just acceptance. Not just tolerance. Love. The radical notion that everything that happens to you, including the things that break your heart, cost you money, damage your reputation, or completely derail your plans, is exactly the raw material you need to become who you're supposed to be. Now, this is where most people push back, because loving your obstacle sounds insane when you're actually inside one. When the relationship ends. When the business collapses. When the person you trusted most walks away. It doesn't feel like material. It feels like pure destruction. But think about the people you most admire. The ones who seem unbreakable, whose success feels earned and real and deep. Almost without exception, their resilience was forged in something hard. Their clarity came from confusion. Their strength came from being broken and choosing to rebuild differently. Setbacks are not interruptions to your story. They are your story. The Stoic practice here is to ask, right in the middle of the difficulty, what is this teaching me? What is this making possible that wasn't possible before? What version of me is being built right now if I choose to use this instead of being destroyed by it? That question is rocket fuel. You don't have to be grateful for the pain immediately. But you can decide right now that nothing that happens to you will ever be wasted. Rule number 4 is to premeditate disaster. Most people do everything they can to avoid thinking about what could go wrong. They call it optimism. The Stoics called it dangerous. There's a practice at the heart of Stoic philosophy called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It sounds grim. But in reality, it's one of the most psychologically liberating things you will ever do. The practice is simple. Before you pursue something important, you deliberately imagine everything that could go wrong. Not in a spiral of anxiety, but in a calm, methodical walk through the worst realistic outcomes. The deal falls through. The person leaves. The health scare is real. The investment fails. You sit with those possibilities. Not to despair, but to desensitize. Here's why it works. Fear draws its power from the unknown. The thing you haven't let yourself think about lives in the dark corners of your mind, and because you refuse to look at it directly, it grows. It becomes monstrous. It shapes your decisions from the shadows, making you hesitant, cautious, half-committed, always holding something back just in case. You end up living a half-life, hedging against a fear you never even properly examined. Premeditatio malorum drags that fear into the light. You look at the worst case clearly and honestly, and you ask yourself, could I survive this? Could I recover? Would life continue? Almost always, the answer is yes. The monster shrinks. The shadow disappears. And you walk forward with your full energy committed, not split. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and he was right. The anticipatory dread of losing something is often far worse than actually losing it. The anxiety about failure is often more debilitating than failure itself. When you premeditate disaster, you rob the future of its power to paralyze you. You've already done the emotional work in advance. Whatever comes, you've been there in your mind. You know you can handle it. This is not pessimism. This is armor. Think about your biggest fear right now. Look at it directly. Walk through it. You'll find on the other side a version of yourself who is no longer afraid to act. Rule number 5 is to use death as fuel. You are going to die. That sentence either paralyzes you or it sets you free. The Stoics believed it should do the latter, and they built an entire practice around making sure it did. Memento mori, remember death. Not as a morbid obsession, but as the sharpest clarifying tool available to a human being. Because nothing cuts through distraction, procrastination, and false priority like the genuine awareness that your time here is finite. Marcus Aurelius returned to this thought constantly throughout his private journals. He wasn't being dramatic. He was being precise. He understood that the awareness of death, held clearly and consistently in the mind, has a unique power. It makes the unimportant things fall away, and it makes the important things feel urgently important. Think about what you keep postponing. The conversation you haven't had. The work you keep meaning to start. The person you've been meaning to forgive, or call, or become. You postpone these things because you operate as though you have unlimited time. You don't. And somewhere beneath your daily routine, you already know that. Seneca was unsparing about this. He wrote that most people don't really live. They merely exist, drifting through days that feel endless until, suddenly, they aren't. The tragedy isn't death itself. It's the unlived life that precedes it. Memento mori doesn't tell you to be reckless. It tells you to be awake. To bring the same urgency to your actual goals that you'd bring to them if you really knew, that your time was measured. There's a reason people who survive near-death experiences often describe life afterward as completely transformed. It's not that anything external changed. It's that the awareness of finitude became real to them. The things that used to feel urgent, the social performance, the comparison, the small daily anxieties, collapsed in importance. And what was always important suddenly demanded their full attention. You don't need a near-death experience to access that clarity. You just need to remember you will die. Your life is happening right now. What are you waiting for? And finally, rule number 6 is to build the inner citadel. Everything you've learned so far, stripping the glamour, internalizing your goals, transforming obstacles, anticipating disaster, using death as fuel, all of it is construction material. And this is what you're building, a fortress inside yourself that no person, no event, and no tragedy can ever breach. The philosopher Pierre had it, writing about Marcus Aurelius, called this the inner citadel. It's the idea that the deepest part of who you are, your capacity to reason, to choose your response, to assign meaning, belongs entirely and exclusively to you. No one can enter without your permission. No circumstance can destroy it. It cannot be taken, only abandoned. This is what separated Marcus Aurelius from every emperor who came before and after him. He had all the external power a human being could possess: armies, wealth, absolute authority. And he understood that none of it was the source of his strength. His strength lived inside him. And because it was inside him, it was untouched. Here's what that means for you, practically. People will betray you. They already have. The world will be unfair to you. It already is. Plans will collapse. Relationships will end. Opportunities will disappear. Health will fail. None of this is speculation. All of it is coming, in some form, for everyone. The person without an inner citadel is at the mercy of every one of these events. Each one has the power to destabilize them, to define them, to devastate them. They live in a constant state of vigilance, protecting their happiness by trying to control a world that simply cannot be controlled. The person with an inner citadel faces the same exact events. But they are not at their mercy. Because their center of gravity is internal, not external. Their peace doesn't depend on outcomes. Their identity doesn't depend on results. They can lose the job, the relationship, the status, and still know, with quiet certainty, who they are and what they stand for. Building this is not a one-time event. It's a practice. Every time you choose your response instead of just reacting. Every time you apply these 6 rules instead of reverting to desperation. Every time you look at difficulty and ask, what does this make possible, you add another stone to the wall. The citadel is built one choice at a time. Start now. You came here feeling like a beggar, chasing things that kept retreating, running toward a life that always seemed one step ahead of you. These 6 rules don't promise you a life without difficulty. No honest philosophy would. What they promise is something rarer and far more valuable, a mind that difficulty cannot break. Strip the glamour. Internalize the goal. Use the obstacle. Anticipate the fall. Remember that you will die. And build the fortress inside. This is what Marcus Aurelius did. Not in one grand revelation, but in thousands of quiet daily choices, recorded in a private journal never intended for the world to read. He didn't become an emperor by accident. He became one fully, inwardly, through the daily practice of thinking correctly. You are not waiting for better circumstances. You are not waiting for permission. The architecture is in your hands. Start building. You check your phone again. Nothing. You type out a message, delete it, type it again, and still nothing. You've been here before, that familiar ache of wanting something so badly it consumes your thoughts, only to watch it slip through your fingers. The job you didn't get. The person who stopped texting back. The dream that somehow keeps getting postponed. And somewhere in the quiet moments you don't want to sit with, a question haunts you: why does this keep happening? Why do you want so badly and still end up empty? Here's what no one tells you. The problem isn't that you want too much. The problem is how you want. There's a way of desiring that actually repels the very things you're chasing. And there's another way, an ancient way, that transforms wanting into a kind of magnetic force you didn't know you possessed. But before you can understand that shift, you have to see the turning points. The moments where everything changes direction. The 5 gates you have to walk through before your mind can finally think the way emperors thought. The first turning point is realizing that your desperation has a smell. Animals can smell fear. People can smell need. And the universe, in its strange and merciless way, seems designed to withhold exactly what you grip too tightly. The moment you stop grasping is often the moment things start coming toward you. Not because the universe magically rearranges itself, but because you finally stop getting in your own way. The second turning point hits when you understand that wanting something and needing something are not the same thing. Need is a cage. Want can be a compass. But most people never make that distinction. They turn every desire into a survival mechanism, which means every failure feels like death. And when you're fighting for your life every time something doesn't work out, you don't move with grace. You move with desperation. And desperation, again, repels. The third turning point comes when you stop blaming the world for its indifference. The world doesn't owe you anything. It never did. And that sounds harsh until you realize that the world's indifference is actually your greatest freedom. If the world doesn't owe you anything, then you don't have to wait for it to give you permission. You don't have to wait for it to be fair. You can stop looking up, waiting for someone to hand you what you want, and start looking inward. The fourth turning point arrives when you finally see that most of what you want is not even real. You've been chasing images, projections, versions of yourself that exist only in your head. And you've been running after them like they're actual things you can hold. But you can't hold a fantasy. You can only exhaust yourself trying. When you see this clearly, something in you stops. And in that stopping, you can finally take a real step forward. The fifth turning point is when you accept that you will die. Not in a morbid way that paralyzes you. In a way that wakes you up. Because once you really accept that your time is limited, you stop saving your life for later. You stop waiting for the right moment. You realize that the right moment is now, and it always was now, and you were the only one who didn't show up. After these 5 gates, something in you is different. You're not the same person who started this journey. You're quieter. More still. And from that stillness, you can finally learn the 6 rules that rewire everything. The rules that let you move through the world not as a beggar, but as someone who has built something inside themselves that cannot be touched. The rules that Marcus Aurelius used to rule an empire while his body failed him and everyone he trusted betrayed him. He didn't win because he wanted it more. He won because he thought differently. And that same thinking is available to you right now. If something in this video cracked something open in you, leave a comment below that says, "I am building." That's it. 3 words that mean everything. And if you want to keep thinking like an emperor, make sure to subscribe to the Fear Sermon and turn on notifications. Because this is not a one-time lesson. This is a practice. And we are just getting started. Thank you for being here.